This week we wanted to bring Doug Thorpe in. Doug is the director of integration at Acquira. We had some pretty exciting news with a deal with one of our A's just closed yesterday or 2 days ago, that Doug can fill you in on and talk about all of the post-acquisition process, what that looks like. So Doug, you want to just take a minute to introduce yourself?
Yeah, and thanks everybody, and welcome. My name is Doug Thorpe. I am serving as Director of Integration and Leadership at Acquira, and what that means is the program that we call ACE Integration is a separate process that we bolt on to the back end of Accelerator Plus and the transaction advisory services that Rich Cobbage's team delivers. We are the kind of the ongoing to get you through the closing and the transition of the business for the several months. If I may, I'm just going to hit the highlights of the program. You might have heard this, maybe you are aware of it. It is optional. Unless you are taking advantage of the equity fund, and then ACE becomes a requirement. But the ACE program is essentially a 4-month engagement that we enter in early before closing and help you through really zeroing in. When you get past the heavy lifting of making your final investment decision and get your APA drafted, then we come on board and work with you to start really turning your attention to the final details of getting ready for close, and then being there during the closing event and the first couple of days on site so that you can get a little bit of assistance with talking to the team and setting things on the right course. The program post-closing is generally prescribed to be 3 months. Sometimes it drags on a little longer depending on the circumstances. But in the package, we have a lead integrator who takes care of all things in general with you. We have a finance integrator specialist and a people and culture integrator specialist that are involved in our master project plan for ACE right now sits at about 137 task items to think about. So it's a lot of detail, a lot of opportunity to focus on elements you might not have otherwise thought about. But our president, Brian Stroh, likes to call it your insurance policy for success. And it is always caution him when he says that we are not an insurance product. That's a don't be them, but it's that little extra boost with a team of experts that can help you really try to blow through the transition event, hit all the high points, get all the important things done. So Ty alluded to a close we had yesterday. Some of you might know through the group here, Noah Weiss. He and his wife Joyce successfully closed on a company called Wired Electric. It's just outside of St. Louis in Arnold, Missouri. It's a smaller company that is focused on commercial electrical services, but I have rapidly begun calling it our poster child of ideal transactions. And what I mean by that is the seller has been incredibly motivated and cooperative. When the seller has been asked for information, it usually arrives same day, and worst case, next day. And for those of you that have begun a journey negotiating with sellers, you might realize that that's kind of rare, to be honest. A lot of times you make those asks and it's days and weeks, not hours, to get the response. So Noah has had the blessing of a very cooperative and motivated seller. To give you all some color, the backstory on the motivation for selling, the owner is a man who's been in the business for a long time. It's about a 25-year-old company. But in the last year and a half, his mother passed away. And on her deathbed, she told him, "Sell the damn company and get on with your life." And so he did. He obeyed his mama and put the company up for sale, and is happily sailing off into the sunset with his wife and kids. So but it's gone very well, and that's not to say we haven't been without hiccups. You get all the ancillary parties involved, like banks and insurance people and attorneys, and things begin to happen. But all in all, it's been a very good and well done experience for Noah. So I was on a call with him this morning, and he's excited, and he's in St. Louis. It's cold in St. Louis right now, by the way. So he was in a warehouse setting with a jacket on for our meeting. But anyway, it's all going well. He and his wife did relocate to St. Louis to make this deal happen. It was not something done in his home geography, but they are well situated and moving on with that. So,
where do they relocate from? Sorry to step on you. I just, as a point of curiosity.
That's a great question, and I was posed that earlier, and I don't have a good recall. I want to say it's like Chicago, maybe. So not a huge move, but a move nonetheless. Ty, you may know better.
I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm looking it up.
Yeah. That was kind of way early on in our discussion. We Noah engaged the ACE program in middle December. We thought we were actually going to have an early January close, but it did get held up over some insurance matters. So we had to delay it until yesterday. But all that's been resolved, and everybody's happy.
And it was an electrical company, you said, right?
Yeah.
Did he have any industry experience in that?
No, he does not. He came out of a corporate life, primarily as an HR executive, principally in recruiting and placement. So, quick story on that, as you'll learn in the ACE material, we do spend a lot of time talking about the people and culture elements of your new business. And part of that does recommend identifying someone to be on your leadership team that's going to focus on nothing but the people and culture. Noah, and I don't think I'm talking out of school or behind his back. I think he would gladly share this with anybody. But at first he said, "I don't need to hire a people and culture person. That's what I do. I know all that, and explained to me why I ought to think about that." And I reminded him that the thing we're trying to help you get your head around is this idea of building a truly management run company. And by that, we mean other people on the team making the day-to-day things happen, so that you as an entrepreneur are not bogged down in the day-to-day, and you may well be able to look at the bigger picture, the more strategic thinking. And in Noah's case, his long game is he has created a holding company to do this work, and this was a stock purchase of this particular business. He has every intent to spend time doing what he's got to do to get this one established under his control. But then he's going to do everything he can to immediately start looking for another deal to do.
So and he's based in Austin, Texas, just for the record.
Say again?
He was living in Austin, Texas.
Oh, that's right. I should have known that. That's next door to me. So so Austin to St. Louis. That's a shift. That's going to be a shift. Yeah. So he thought about that and came back and said, "You're right. I don't want to get bogged down, and just because I know how to do it doesn't mean I should do it." And so he is moving full speed ahead with the sort of the ACE framework of identifying the right person on the team to be a people and culture expert for him.
Do you remember offhand how big the business was?
It's not a real big. Purchase price was right at 3 million. I think there's only 10 employees in it. They're primarily commercial right now, but his long-term vision is to add a residential segment to it.
Cool. Cool. And so from your perspective with Ace, and like given the whole process, they go through the diligence with Rich and the coaches and stuff. At what point do you come in to start looking at the business?
Great question. What Rich and I have struck upon is the idea that we would like to be able to see you get past final investment decision and move quickly into the drafting of the purchase agreement. And what that means is you've got enough of your due diligence information resolved that you actually can start working with the attorney to draft the purchase agreement. Because one thing we're discovering, and we've had a number of cases with this, we recommend that you as a buyer get the opportunity to interview key employees of the business prior to closing and prior to spending all your money to buy the business. And it's real similar to thinking about going and buying a house without ever walking through it. I don't know of really anybody that would seriously consider that, certainly not for their own residents. And the same is true with this business. If you haven't, it's one thing to talk to the seller and hear all the stories and hear them relay who is on the team and what they know how to do, what their tenure is, what their experience is. But until you talk to a couple of those key people, you don't ever get a good feeling of what's really going on. Now, what we immediately run into is that the seller is reluctant to introduce you to people on the team because they're not ready yet to announce the sale. And what we have had happen in a couple of cases, we have convinced the seller that if they could see the purchase agreement, the kind of first draft of it with all of the right factors, terms, and elements in it, that should give them the confidence that the deal's really going to happen. And now we need to have that interview. And I'm not going to lie, we still have sellers that are reluctant to do that. But at least if you've gone that far with the deal, they feel much closer. It's not good enough to show them your bank commitment letter. It's not good enough to revert back to the LOI and promise them that the deal's really going to happen. So just in a number of cases in the last half year, we've seen sellers who have said, well, show me the purchase agreement. And if we get that far, I'll be okay with talking to my key people and figuring it out. And that seems to work. So that's a long story to answer. That's where typically Rich considers handing off to my team to start having meetings with you, talking about the deal and working through things. Now, there is a cost for ACE, but you don't have to pay anything for ACE until the day of closing. So we will come alongside and do some of that preparatory work with you prior to you essentially paying a dime for anything else on the transaction.
Mm-hmm. And then what is the ACE like? What does the ACE process look like through the whole of it after they actually close? How long does it take?
Yeah, the core program, as it's defined in the agreement, is a 3 to 4 month engagement post closing. After you get through the close, your lead integrator is going to work with you, and we will bring on the other specialty integrators as well, the finance and the P&C person, to begin the process of sort of peeling the onion, just looking at all the elements of the business. Now that you've really got it in your hand, and the first month is typically a lot of minutia, quite frankly. I mean, you're dealing with everything from transferring bank accounts or opening new bank accounts to where's the password to QuickBooks? You know, how do I get there? How do I have that? And you've got, you know, other assets in the business, buildings, vehicles, equipment, inventory, other things like that to get your head around. So it's a lot of pretty intense kind of drink out of the fire hose kind of experience, getting to know the business, getting to know the people, finding out um, what is going on. And then as we kind of start moving into month 2, we will host for you a workshop with your newly formed leadership team. As you look across the business and determine who can be on your leadership team, we'll do this workshop to bring them together as a team and really give them sort of that starting point. We'll talk about mission, vision, and values. We'll spend a good bit of time developing that. And we like to encourage you to let that be a collaborative exercise with your team. Because it's one thing for you to have a vision, but if you don't have everybody else bought in on it or maybe even helped build it, it's going to be hard to get the buy-in you want. And we also, during that workshop, will focus a lot on key process mapping, taking a look, because a lot of times these businesses, they're making money, but they've never formalized any of their process. Things are done with sticky notes on computer screens, you know, and you want to get past a lot of that and start thinking about core process and procedures that you can begin to implement and have your leadership team help bring that together.
Yeah, we got a good question. If the seller stays on for a year, do you get them involved in the ACE process?
Yes, typically we do. However, I will say that we do not recommend having the seller attend the workshop, for instance, because this is your opportunity to really gel with your new people. And if that seller prior owner is standing there, there's that little edge to it that makes it hard. You know, maybe those people aren't willing to really speak up on their own because they're either historically intimidated by the old owner or whatever the dynamic was. You don't want to have that interrupting anything you're trying to do.
Right. I think, does anybody else have any questions? We can open it up to the floor a bit here, I think.
Yeah, Ty, I have a question if I may.
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
Doug, I was just curious, when you guys looked at this company, you know, for the ACE program, you know, you have the people side, the financial side, the sales and marketing side. I think there might be one other one. Was there one area that stood out from the others as being like the biggest red flag that you guys needed to address first than the others, or were they all kind of opportunities? Were there opportunities to improve each of those kind of the same amount?
That's a great question, Justin. But the honest answer is every deal's different. Everything shows up with a slightly different spin, slightly different twist. In some cases, as an example, we have the early makings of a real leadership team at the business. The prior owner has delegated some things to key people that have been with them a while and they trust and they respect and they're willing to let them go. And then we've got other deals where the owner has kept everything just pretty well almost secret and locked up and nobody has a sense of delegated empowerment to do anything, you know. And the other thing that comes to my mind to your question, a lot of two big areas that are challenges. One, I mentioned already, process. A lot of times these businesses have not spent a lot of time thinking about process. They know how they think they want to get the work done, but they haven't created a system or a flow to really make that happen. So things like order entry, you know, if you're like, I'm thinking of plumbing and electrical, who both have usually carry a good stock of supplies and materials to have ready in vans and trucks. Well, there needs to be a process about that. Otherwise, you're going to overorder or underorder, and there's a lot of inefficiency and potential waste that goes with that. So having a process to manage that is important. So that's kind of area number one, process. Area number two is honestly with financial. And you probably all had some experience with that, trying to get through LOI and get through your QOEs. You realize a lot of these sellers don't do a good job keeping the books clean. We had a deal bust recently where the owner was using the business pretty much as a personal checking account and running a lot of personal credit card debt through the books. And that might be nice for your tax situation, but it's not good for creating a saleable asset on the market. So those are some of the disciplines and areas that often get cleaned up. And then lastly, I guess I would include the people and culture part of it. Again, a lot of these businesses, the owners haven't thought a lot about how they really want to motivate their people. They might have figured out ways to compensate them with spot bonuses or little perks and incentives, but it's not really a program. It's not a formal thing that everybody gets a shot at participating in.
And we've seen even
that.
with Kevin Cooper's business, like I was talking to him the other day, the people and culture initiatives he's implemented are already showing a lot of gains at his company. So that's one of the reasons we're always emphasizing people and culture so much. Yeah. Patrick had a question too. Does the AE typically fill one of those three functions?
No. I guess the closest thing to filling one of the ACE functions would be the lead integrator. I mean, this is still your company. You are the owner of it, so you have the full spectrum of visibility and responsibility for it. So in that regard, yeah, I guess functionally, ultimately, that's what you're going to be doing. But even with that, if you grab on to the idea of creating a management run company, you may work hard to identify somebody who can stand up as a general manager for your business on site and give them a lot of authority and a lot of power to do things on your behalf.
I'm curious, you talked a bit about the, forming a leadership team, making the company management run. How do you identify people within the companies who could be leaders and like step up to fill that role?
Well, I think it often does start with your discussion with the seller about who their people are, who's been with them, what kind of tenure and experience the people bring. And in the dialogue, the download you can get from the seller about how they've looked at the work and the people, you'll get an indication of who might be a kind of a de facto supervisor, team leader, project manager, and even office manager type. So I think you can get some early indications of who those people are. But we had one circumstance that I can think of where in the process after closing of doing one-on-one meetings with people, there was somebody that just emerged as a really strong, and I mean strong in a good way, personality that seemed to know everybody and seemed to be some of the kind of informal glue that kept the business going. And it was like, why wouldn't this person be my office manager? And maybe I could fit the people and culture responsibility under them, and we could go with it. And that's what they did. And it worked, seems to be working really well.
That's great. I remember Hayden mentioning that when you announce the sale of the company to the employees, you can sometimes see the natural leaders just by like how people gather during the announcement. People will like gravitate around the natural leaders.
Yeah, I will confess to all you guys publicly here. I tend to operate as a glass half full kind of guy, and but throughout my career, even before I joined Acquira, what I've witnessed in some of these situations, in these transitions, almost always there is some pent up energy that the seller owner never tapped into. You gifted and talented people on the team that never got a chance to contribute to the greater good of the business. And if you can look for that when you start meeting your teams and keep your antenna tuned in for those kind of inklings of ideas and possibilities, and don't discount anything you're being told by these people, you might have a real diamond in the rough there buried on your team that the seller never thought about giving a chance.
That's great. Anyone else have any questions about the post-acquisition process in general, or Noah's deal? Because I'm also curious, like Ace is, how long is Ace? It's 6 months now, or 4 months?
It's 4 to 6 months total.
4 to 6 months
is the way we've got it worded in the agreement. Yep.
Yeah. So what happens after Ace? Do people just sort of walk away and they're left to their own devices?
Well, that's a great question, Ty, and it's a great opportunity to kind of announce to the world we are working on the development of 2 extra program offerings, and I call it, kind of by popular demand, some of our former buyers have asked about this, and one is something for the AE themselves, kind of a programmed solution. And what we're looking at is the creation of a mastermind group that will allow you to come in, and on a monthly basis you meet. It will be virtual, but you would meet in a roundtable kind of forum and work with other AEs just on a peer-to-peer basis, sharing ideas, sharing stories, sharing challenges, and collectively problem solving. But with that, there is also a curriculum that has been developed that really kind of takes the whole sophistication of the business to another level. It's kind of a short course, almost MBA style learning that can get into more key topics like strategic planning, value propositioning, marketing, leadership, a lot more about leadership of the business. And that program, as it stands right now, is going to go live April 1st. And there'll be an opportunity to join in on that. Our vision right now is that you have to have done your deal to get ready to come in on that program. But it is intended to be a 12-month opportunity. And if there's an interest after 12 months to keep your group together and keep it running and going and such, we'll certainly do that. And the roundtable meetings themselves will be facilitated by myself and 2 other coaches that have been doing this for a very long time. And so that's an offering for the AEs themselves. Then we've got a parallel offering we're putting together for the members of your newly appointed leadership team, because for some of these people, they've never been a manager before, and now you're asking them to become one. And this program likewise will be in a peer-to-peer cohort roundtable kind of format, meeting monthly with its own curriculum on what it means to be a first-time manager. And both programs will have a separate weekly call-in opportunity, separate from the group meeting, but it'll be published days and times to come in online, kind of an open mic, ask the coach a question sort of a situation. And that too is structured to be a 12-month offering for anybody that's on your leadership team.
Okay, cool. I guess I kind of wanted to go back to Noah's deal a bit. You mentioned that it was sort of an ideal relationship with the sellers. But I know we talked about it yesterday specifically. Like, I know you can talk a bit about the horror stories and try to collect that information from sellers. How do you manage when you're not able to get those documents? How do you keep going forward with your deal, or at least keep your motivation up through the process?
Well, great question, and this is something Rich Coppage and I were actually on a call earlier this morning. We were talking about some things, and this was just, I want to frame this right. This is just a real kind of brainstorming idea. He and I both, certainly have been alongside with many of you, and both of us have history even prior to that. And what we were talking about was if you look at the critical path of events that need to happen, like you write and issue an LOI, and then you finally get it countersigned, and then you open up due diligence and your quality of earnings effort. A lot of that's information gathering and fact finding and so forth. And then you do, a revised and updated valuation. You kind of start negotiating on that. All of the milestones you can think of in that process ought to have some time bounds on them. And what I mean by that is not necessarily contractually, but just conceptually. Like, if it takes a seller 2 months to countersign your LOI, they're probably not in the deal. They probably really aren't there. Or they don't agree at all with the terms and they just need to come up and say so. But to let deals start slow by not being able to get an LOI signed, really? And what Rich and I were talking about philosophically, maybe our advisory work is to encourage you guys to, just stop, find another one. Don't mess with somebody that's going to be that unresponsive to your requests. Either they're in the game to sell it or they're not. And even if they think they're in the game, but they know in their heart they've done some funky stuff with their books and now they're making the financials hard to get a hold of and hard to have access to, those are red flags. They really are. And what Rich and I were talking about is maybe doing a little more on our side to sort of help guide some of the reasonableness of those exchanges and that tracking.
Cool. What would that look like? Like, is it just a matter of people saying, like, I'm done with this deal, move on to another deal?
Well, yeah. I mean, ultimately, yes, that's what it could amount to. And you don't necessarily go just from let's try, now we're done. I mean, there might be some degrees of messaging back to the broker, back to the seller to say, come on, guys, I'm going to give you 3 extra days and then that's it. Or, something along those lines. But we've got the benefit of hindsight in a lot of these deals, and as we all say, hindsight's 2020. And Gloria, I don't want to put you on a spot, but knowing today,
I've been dancing around Gloria this whole time.
what you didn't know then. I mean, if how long was your LOI? 4 months to sign, something like that.
It took 2 months.
2 months. Okay. Well, again, maybe not grossly bad in the big scheme of things, but and what was the conversation about during those 2 months?
Yeah, but it was, if I count from the first LOI that I sent, it's more.
Yeah.
It was basically almost 3.5 months since the first LOI that I sent.
Yeah. And it, in hindsight, again, we've learned more about your seller as months have gone on, but you know, that probably was a real good indicator that this was going to be a hard deal to get done. Just that kind of delay early on. And
Yeah.
when I say we, like I'm speaking of myself, Rich, and I'm sure Brian would be an advocate this way too. We are here to help you guys get these deals done, and you know, we can't make the final decisions for you on any of these matters, but we can certainly share some experiences that correlate to either really great deals being done or really difficult deals being strung out and potentially never closed. And we don't
Yeah.
want to see that for anybody.
Does anyone else have any questions about the post-close process or the collecting of data during the diligence process that Doug might be able to speak to? And I'll jump at once. All right. Doug, is there anything else you think we could cover?
Well, yeah, I've got a thought. I would really encourage you as you're going through your process here. I mean, obviously, you've made a life choice about wanting to pursue the purchase of a company. And, you know, there's clearly a whole lot that goes with that. But when you zero in on what are you going to do once you get the company, now it's yours, seller is technically gone. I mean, I know they're going to retain for a little bit, but it's now your business. And where I'm going is the notion of work hard on casting your own vision of where you think you want to take the company, you know, and it's not just why you bought the company, but, you know, what do you see the opportunity to do? And as a leader of the business, the more you are grounded in your own sense of vision and purpose for the business, I promise you, the much easier it's going to be to make all of the decisions you're going to need to make as things go on day by day. But if you don't have a good, you know, foundation of a vision for where you want to go with it, decisions can be hard, and sometimes they can be wrong, because in the minute it looks good, but when you compare it to the direction you really want to be going, it could be taking you off course. And sometimes, you know, those choices are hard to make. But I can tell you from experience working with a lot of business leaders in many different levels, the more you can do to really lock in on your own sense of purpose and vision for where you want to go, there'll be a whole lot more of your decisions that are going to be no-brainers. You're going to be able to look at it and say, does this serve my purpose? Nope, doesn't. Okay, guess what? Nope, we're not going to do it. Move on. What's next? And you'll be equipped and empowered yourself to be able to do that. And then as you assemble this leadership team, you can start sharing that with them so that they then have a grounding and a foundational understanding of where we're going. And they then will make choices that are consistent with that or not. Much easier to make those kind of decisions when you know where it is you want to go with it.
So do you have a favorite example of that on the positive and the negative side?
Well, I will tell you on the negative side, in my earlier career, when I got out of corporate and actually did a startup venture, I had not done enough of really crafting and formulating where I thought we should be going. And I was guilty of chasing the revenue. When somebody showed up and said, well, here was the classic example for me. It was a service-oriented business, but it happened to be in the financial services arena. But I had a kind of a general vision of what service I was bringing to the market. But I would have these pretty good-sized institutions come to me and say, well, what you're doing is close to what I want, but I think I want this over here, just a little bit different. I need this piece. I was chasing the money and I said, oh, okay, well, I'll figure that out. Sure, we'll do that for you. And then I had all these different service contracts and I wasn't doing the heart of what I really wanted to be doing. And it created huge distractions and a lot of expense that in hindsight, again, being 2020, I never should have bit off on. Because those deals, those contracts weren't permanent. I mean, they had terms, and when the other party decided to go away and go another direction, I was left high and dry with either people or equipment that I didn't have a good use for, and I was constantly having to sort of chase that part of the equation. So, I claim I was very guilty of not locking in and being true to my original sense of purpose. Good.
How long
I
ago
could
was
make,
that?
Thank you for sharing that.
say again?
Was it how
time?
long ago? How long ago was that?
Well, all of that story started in 2003 and went up
Okay.
through about 2008. Of course,
So you've learned a lot of lessons since then.
I learned a whole lot of lessons during that process. Yeah. And I could tell you, and I had a convenient excuse because I did have an advisory board, but they were equally motivated to just chase the money. And I would bring these ideas to them. They go, well, sure. Why can't you do that? That makes sense. Why don't you go do some of that? And it was like, not helpful advice.
What about a good example? I know, like from my perspective with Acquire, I'm always like, well, that's if we look at our core values, we can't do that, so we've got to do this. Like those conversations happen internally at Acquire all the time. But can you think of an example outside of that?
Well, I'll reiterate the principle first. The thing about being an entrepreneur and what I just described in my own story, there's a real temptation to chase bright, shiny objects. It could be new technology, it could be new ideas, new services, or even something that you wake up, you had a dream and you said, "Oh, wow, I could go do this." And if you've already got an organization, a team, in this case, the business you're going to buy up and running, and now you come in and you basically announce a left turn at Albuquerque, well, they don't know where they're going. And it creates this amazing confusion among your team, and they start losing trust and faith in you as the leader. Because it's like, well, I don't really have to commit to today because guess what? It's going to change tomorrow. And how many of us have worked for somebody like that in the past, So that's why it's so critically important to kind of lock in on your own sense of core value and direction you want to take.
And that is a big part of ACE in general.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mission, vision, values, all that stuff.
Yeah, and what you'll learn working with us on the ACE program, and if you hear it from me, you'll definitely hear it this way. Creating your sense of vision and mission for your business is more than just the words you put in a book or the words you put on a poster in the office. It's way more than that. You have to live it. You have to want to go in every day, demonstrate that, and live it in everything you do and how you treat people, how you work with your team, how you work with your customers. We've got a company we're working with right now down in Florida, a large construction company, and the owner there has a mantra that says, we do the right thing and we do it well. Pretty plain and simple. And as we were visiting with him, we said, so give us some examples of how does that really live out? And he said, well, in commercial construction, he said there's a lot of stuff that changes rapidly, and we're constantly dealing with change orders and things like that, and stuff gets slipped through the cracks. There's no doubt about it. He said, my first example of that is, he said, if we drop the ball, we're going to fix it at our dime, and plain and simple. We're not going to argue about it. We're not going to try to hide it. We're not going to try to roll it into another line item on the project. We're just going to deal with it. And he said, have I spent money doing that out of my own pocket? Yeah, I have. But guess what? It comes back to me in spades. He said, all of my key developers that rely on me, they've been with me for years because they know that's how I operate.
I think that's the mark of a real service professional.
Right.
Like that's the standard. That's the high water mark, and so few of them like live up to that ideal. So when when you're working with a service professional who holds himself to those standards, it's refreshing, right? And it's the kind of person you'll want to hire. Again, it's the kind of person you want to recommend. I like that one a lot.
Right. Right. Well, and and you're absolutely right. And, Jordan, in the residential space, that is so huge because the word about that spreads like wildfire, and you don't have to spend a dime on that marketing. And if you're the guy that shows up, and I've often said, your success as a business owner is not so much about what you do well on a regular basis, but it's how you respond to when you did it wrong. And if in the case of a home service business, if an installation doesn't go right, if all the fittings aren't tight, or if something's loose and needs another visit, don't charge another trip charge for that. I mean, go out and fix it, right? It's just little things like that if the homeowner is sitting there saying, this isn't quite right, and they go, well, fine, I'll be back tomorrow, but there's going to be another trip charge for that. It's like, no, you screwed it up the first time. Why do I have to pay another trip charge? I mean, there's just little things like that can be considered. And you can deal with the quality of the work that was done by your tech. You deal with that later, I mean, yes, I think you got to deal with it, but it's not for the customer to bear the burden of.
And that's the sort of wisdom you get when you sign up for the ACE program. Does anyone else have any questions before we wrap up? Last
Quick one
minute.
for you.
Yeah.
What prep can we do? I'm like, I think I say this every call, but I'm still new. Haven't gotten to my first skill yet. What can I be doing other than the training to prepare?
Prepare for ACE or prepare for just the acquisition?
Well, all of it, but ACE, I guess, is a good topic for Doug.
Well, what I can tell you is, I mean, and this is really the way we've designed our program offerings. There's basically a couple of really important phases to think of, and just kind of gear your own thinking. Part of it, what I'm getting ready to say is, part of it is, don't get ahead of yourself. Number one, I mean, take care of the immediate things now, and look at it in phases. Spend your time and energy now, if you're really early on in the process, front ending, and you're still even vetting deals, trying to identify a target company. Do what you can to educate yourself about that business and that work, and compare it to your own investment thesis. Your thesis is the place you start with framing up your own idea about where you want to be going and what you want to be doing. And I would argue it's the early part of creating your own personal vision and purpose, right? And so you want to vet and shop for companies that are going to give you the best chance of fulfilling that. No deal's ever going to be perfect, but you can get deals that are much closer by, again, going back to what I said a minute ago, knowing what you really want to do in the first place. So,
and you're talking mostly about like values and direction and
yeah.
exit strategy even before you begin.
Yeah. I mean, I would admit, I'll give you again a little bit of a personal example. When I think about our whole spectrum of home service type companies, personally, when I think about it, if I were to go pull a trigger and go after one, I could see myself doing, you know, plumbing, electric, HVAC. But talk to me about buying a roofing company. I'm not getting up on a ladder, so I don't want to get involved with something like that. I mean, and that may sound like just a crazy, weird condition, but that's my truth. I don't want to get up on a ladder on a roof anywhere, and I couldn't consciously ask an employee to go do it. And I know there's plenty of people that love that game, love that business, and man, if that's your deal, go for it, because I'm not. You know, and so it even can be little things like that to really sort of personalize that vision.
And that investment thesis is incredibly important right from the beginning, because we've seen a lot of people buy bad businesses because they didn't follow their investment thesis or didn't have a well-defined investment thesis and bought something. And then people that did have put the work into crafting an investment thesis and bought great businesses. So like, we really can't stress that part of the training enough. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Any last minute questions? And if not, we can sign off 4 minutes early.
Thanks,
right, well,
everyone.
Yeah,
Look
Doug,
forward to
thanks a
working
lot.
with you.
You too.
Thanks,
Have a
Doug.
good weekend.
You
Thank
bet.
you.
Thanks, everybody.